public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
Ever since 40 years ago, when Richard Nixon declared this war on drugs, presidents in the coming generations from Ronald Reagan to Barack Obama spent more and more money trying to eradicate all suppliers, and it seems as less effort was being put on the demand side, with education, prevention, and rehabilitation. Well, it is now 2016 and the numbers are in. The war on drugs has been a massive failure and has actually caused more unintended negative consequences than positive ones. This war has caused mass incarceration in the US, to corruption, destabilization, and violence in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, to systemic human rights abuses across the world. And all of this is happening while the US spends billions of dollars every year to only create and fuel more powerful drug cartels, as the main goal of a world without drugs seems less and less achievable. For the past few decades, the main view of the government has been no drugs, no problems, so most of the money has gone to eradicating the supply of drugs and jailing drug traffickers. However, this strategy hasn't worked for us, because it's ignoring the most fundamental of market forces, supply and demand. When you decrease the supply of things while demand stays high, the price of the product goes higher. However, this doesn't relate to drugs. The drugs market is not price sensitive. Drugs will continue to be consumed and used no matter what they cost. This in turn leads to encouraged drug production and recruitment of more traffickers, which means more drugs are available for people. The current US government defend themselves by saying drug use in America is half of what it used to be 30 years ago, and that cocaine production in Colombia has dropped. But even after 30 years of billions and billions of dollars used on this war, only more and more people are arrested, and a large percent of them are first-time offenders, while producers are continuously being replaced after others have been caught. Not only that, with a budget of about $30 billion, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency has an efficiency rate of less than 1% when it comes to stopping the flow of drugs coming into the U.S. and inside the U.S. This war, in plain terms, cannot be one focusing on the supply side. Another reason we're losing is prohibition. While it stops some people from taking drugs, overall it causes much more damage than we think. For example, drugs have gotten stronger because of the war against drugs and prohibition, not because of drug users. Drug producers began believing the more potent drugs they can store in the smallest space possible, the more money they'd make. This also happened when alcohol was prohibited earlier in the 19th century. People began taking stronger alcohols, which became more available, instead of light beers, which were outlawed. The drug war has also caused much more violence in countries around the world, between gangs and cartels, since they had no access to the legal system to settle their disputes. The homicide rate in the US is 25 to 75% higher in the US because of the war on drugs. In Mexico alone, around 164,000 people have been murdered between 2007 and 2014, as Mexico is the main country blamed for producing drugs. The most obvious and noticeable impact of this war, however, has been the huge change in the incarceration rates in the US. The US is 5% of the world's population, yet has 25% of the world's prison population. Minorities are the most impacted by this war. African Americans make up 40% of the US prison inmates. White kids are more likely to abuse drugs, but black kids are 10 times more likely to get arrested for drug offenses. This shows how the war on drugs brought upon more and more discrimination in the US, as now more Hispanics and African Americans are seen more as lawbreakers because others in their minorities do drug offenses or are seen as drug sellers. This causes discrimination not only among normal citizens, but also law enforcers. As all this is happening, the government continues to use billions and billions of dollars on trying to stop the suppliers coming from outside the country. Over the past 4 years, they've wasted more than $1 trillion. Now we spend about $50 billion a year trying to eradicate drugs from the US. However, according to DEA estimates, we catch less than 10% of all the illicit drugs. So then how much more money would it take to get the other 90%? Not only that, smoking and tobacco and alcohol are still legal, while they are more dangerous and more likely to kill than marijuana. Yet many people are going to jail for marijuana usage. So is this $50 billion a year for 10% of the drugs and even more money used for prison inmates for an illegal drug that's less dangerous than legal tobacco and alcohol really worth it? Or can we do something else? There have been a few other solutions that have been commented, however never tried. One of the largely supported solutions is instead of criminalizing drug usage, we can add more treatment centers and more accessibility of treatment. Instead of wasting money on trying to stop something that will most likely continue, we must use it to help the people right now in our country that needs help with drugs and controlling their addiction. This solution worked for other countries such as Switzerland in the 1980s, when they experienced a large increase in heroin addiction and street crime grew. However, they tried a new method, harm reduction. They built and opened free heroin maintenance centers where addicts would be treated and stabilized. They could get free high-quality heroin, clean needles, safe injection rooms, showers, beds, and medical supervision. Social workers also helped them with housing and other issues in their lives, and the results were tremendous. There was a huge drop in drug-related crime, and 2 out of the 3 people in the center got regular jobs because now addiction was not taking control of their lives. Today, 70% of all heroin addicts in Switzerland get treatment, and HIV infections have also dropped greatly. Deaths of heroin overdoses have gone down 50%. Also, drug-related sex work and crime have enormously gone down. In conclusion, drug prohibition has created a system that creates human misery for many, bulldozes human rights, and costs huge amounts of money for a goal that simply goes farther away. All this money can be used for better causes and for a better solution than the war on drugs.